30 minutes. That's all it took for every ticket to disappear. Not for Coco Gauff, not for Iga Swiatek. For a 21-year-old from a country that has never, not once in its entire history, produced a top-level tennis star. Her name is Alex Eala. And something is happening around her right now that nobody in professional tennis saw coming. Walk into Sobeys Stadium in Toronto this week, and you won't find empty seats. You'll find flags, hundreds of them. Philippine flags rising from every section, gripped by fans who flew in from across Canada and the United States for one reason only: to watch her walk onto that court. She's not the top seed. She's not even inside the top 15 in the world. And yet tournament organizers keep telling reporters the same thing. They have never seen anything like this from a player ranked outside the top 5. Let that sink in for a second. Outside the top 5. And still, this. So here's the question that should be nagging at you right now. How does a player who's spent years grinding through tournaments nobody bothered to watch suddenly become the reason a WTA 1000 event sells out faster than matches featuring the biggest names in the sport? This isn't a story about one lucky week. It isn't a story about a single viral clip. What's unfolding around Alex Eala in Toronto right now is the payoff of something that started years earlier, far from any spotlight, back when almost nobody believed she would ever make it this far. And if you want to understand why grown adults are getting emotional in those stands, why a nation of over 100 million people has suddenly found its voice in professional tennis, we have to go back before the flags, back before the sold-out crowds, back to a moment where this whole story could have quietly ended before it ever really began. Because what you're watching in Toronto this week isn't where her story starts. It's where it almost stopped. Before there were flags in Toronto, there was a 12-year-old
ticket
girl
demand is
saying
responding
goodbye to her
It
family
is
in Manila
not
and
celebrity.
boarding a plane
Just
to a
another
small
impressive
town in Spain
run.
called Manila.
It became
That's
one of the
where
defining
Rafael
moments
Nadal
in
grew up. That's where his academy sits, tucked into the hills, built to shape the next generation of champions. In 2014, a young Filipino walked through those
Now,
gates as one
fans
of the few
may
players
still
from her country
revisit that
ever given that
photograph
kind of
with
chance.
Princess
Now,
Kate.
understand what that actually meant. The Philippines is a nation of over 100 million people. Basketball is the obsession. Boxing has given the country its legends. But tennis had never handed this country a Grand Slam champion, a top-ranked player, a single defining moment on the biggest stages of the sport. So when Alex Eala left home to train in Spain, she wasn't only chasing her own dream. She was carrying the weight of an entire sporting
That kind of
culture
reputation
that had never
lasts
had a
much
reason
longer
to care
than a
about tennis
viral
before
headline.
her. And for a while, the results came fast. In 2020, she won the girls' doubles title at the Australian Open. In 2021, she added the French
everyone
Open
remembers,
girls' doubles crown.
because they
Then
built
in
the player.
2022, at just 17, she became the first Filipino to win a junior
Alex
Grand Slam singles title, lifting the trophy at the U.S. Open. 3 junior Grand Slam titles
The
before
reason
she even
a
turned 18.
WTA
On paper,
1000 tournament
that reads like
traded
the
for
resume
years
of
in
a
a handful of
future superstar
countries,
in the
the
making.
United
But
States,
here's what
Poland,
those headlines
Spain,
never tell you.
Belarus.
Junior tennis and professional tennis are two completely different worlds. Beating other teenagers
6-3,
means almost
6-2.
nothing once you
In
step
Toronto,
onto a tour
Eala
full of
closed
grown women
6-1
who have
of a
spent
Canadian
decade
tennis stadium
clawing
in
for
August.
ranking points
The room
and
Alex
prize money.
Eala
That
is in
jump
now
from juniors
is
to
not
the WTA Tour has broken far more careers than it has ever built. And for years, that exact
21-year-old
gap
from
is where
Quezon
Alex
City
Eala lived.
had
She
pulled a
trained
bigger crowd
thousands of
than
miles
two
from
of-
home, in a country where she hadn't grown up speaking the language, representing a sport her
What she
own
did not
nation
fully
barely
understand
followed,
yet
facing
was that the
opponents who
woman
had every
standing on the
advantage
other
she
side
didn't.
of the
No
net
home crowd behind her.
and none
No
of it
deep
is
pipeline of
permanent.
Filipino coaches or
Which is
hitting
exactly
partners.
why this
No
defeat
blueprint to
might-
follow, because nobody from her country had ever walked this exact road before. Every single match in those early years, she walked out there essentially alone. Now here's why this part of the story matters
Afterward,
more than you
that
might
at this
think.
level
This
it
isn't
comes down
background
to
you can skip
details,
past.
and that
This
they
is
are
the
very
entire
fine
foundation of
details.
what makes Toronto so extraordinary right now. Because the crowds you're seeing today, the flags, the roar, the sold-out stadiums, none of that existed for most of her career. For years, Alex Eala played in front of scattered applause and half-filled stands, grinding through tournaments most casual fans have never even heard the
aces.
names of.
She committed
If you've ever
0
chased something
double
nobody
faults,
around you believed
and she
in,
won
something
the
you
most
kept showing
famous
up for with
athletes in the
zero
history
proof
of the
it would
sport.
ever pay off, then
Back
you
in the
already know
Philippines.
exactly what those years felt like for her. That quiet, lonely kind of effort nobody claps for. And if this story is already starting to pull you in
all of
if
sport.
some part of you is rooting for a girl who
Paulini is
gave up
30 years
everything
old and
familiar,
she has lived
at
through the
12
fire.
years old to chase a dream her country had never seen come true, then stay with me, because the hardest chapter of her journey hasn't even started yet. Drop a comment
Top
right now
40 on
and
pure
tell me
talent
where in the
everywhere
world
else.
you're watching this from. I want to see just how far this story is traveling tonight, because what happened next almost
In the
ended
way
it
the
all.
crowd
For years
leaned
after
forward
leaving that
every
academy
time
in
she
Spain,
bounced the ball.
Alex Eala didn't
By
become
the-
a star. She became a name buried deep in brackets that nobody outside hardcore tennis circles
Came
ever bothered to
before.
open.
And
Picture
it is more human
a
than
side
any
court at
statistic.
some mid-tier ITF event. Half the seats empty, a scoreboard nobody back home is refreshing. A young
margins,
Filipino walking
because
out to
this
serve
match
in
was
front of
so
maybe
much
a few
closer
hundred
than the
people
final
who
score
came to
makes
watch
it
someone
seem.
else entirely. No flags, no chants, just the sound of a ball off the strings, and underneath it, the quiet, private pressure of knowing that every single match either builds towards something or slowly proves the doubters right. What do you think almost broke her? Because it wasn't one crushing loss. It was something worse. It was years of almost. She'd flash brilliance one week, take a set off a ranked opponent, push a rising star deep into 3 sets, and then lose the very next round to someone the tennis world would forget by the weekend. Close, but never quite enough. Promising, but never fully proven. And that right there is the cruelest place to live in professional sports. Not outright failure, where at least the story is simple. Living instead
here
in that
is what
in-between
she may not have
space,
fully
where everyone
realized
keeps
as
telling
she
you how
said those
talented you
words.
are, while your ranking barely moves an inch. And the weight on her shoulders didn't come from strangers. It came from home. Every time a Filipino sports outlet wrote
Which
her
is the
name,
opposite of
it
what a smart
arrived
left-hander
wrapped
should
in
be
the
doing.
same phrase.
Only
Trained
a
at
third
the
of her
Rafa
serves were
Nadal
slicing
Academy.
away to the
First Filipino to win a junior Grand Slam. The heir apparent. Think about what that label does to a young athlete who hasn't broken through yet at the level that actually counts. It turns every early round exit into a headline about disappointment instead of a story about growth. Ask yourself this. What happens to a young athlete when an entire nation starts believing she's destined for greatness before she's proven it even once on the biggest stage? For years, the answer was pressure with nowhere to go. Because unlike players coming out of tennis powerhouses like the United States or Spain, Eala didn't have a deep bench of countrywomen ahead of her to share that burden. There was no other Filipina on tour soaking up part of that spotlight. It was her, and only her, carrying the hopes of over 100 million people who had never had a single reason to watch a tennis match before she came along. Try to imagine the loneliest version of pressure
Eala
you
was
can
serving,
picture. Now strip
and she
away the
climbed
safety net
to
of
40
shared
to
expectation
30.
entirely. That
She
was
was
her everyday reality. By her early 20s, an age where many top players are already breaking
want
into
to
the
find
top
the
50,
exact
Eala
heartbeat
was
where
still
the dream
chasing
slipped
that
away,
one signature
you have to
win that
look
would
at the
finally
razor-
silence the question Filipino sports media kept quietly circling around. Was she actually going to become everything they said she would? Or was she about to become another cautionary tale about junior success that never made the leap to the professional stage? Every tournament without a breakthrough piled more weight onto that
What the
question.
second
Every
week of a
early
Grand
exit
Slam
made the
feels
comparisons
like.
to her
In a way,
Nadal Academy
Eala
training
simply
feel less
cannot
like a
yet.
compliment and more like an unpaid debt. And here's the part that genuinely stings when you sit with
Trying
it. She
hard
was doing
not to
everything
think about
right.
him watching.
Training at one of the finest
was the
academies on
same
the planet,
Paulini that
working with
Eala
elite coaches, grinding through a schedule most people couldn't survive physically, let alone mentally. And still, the breakthrough refused to come. There's a
traded for
very
years in a
specific
handful
kind
of countries.
exhaustion that
The
comes from
United
doing
States,
everything
Poland,
correctly
Spain,
and
Belarus,
still not getting the
6-3,
results the
6-2.
world expects
In
of you.
Toronto,
It's
Eala
different from
closed
failure.
6-1
In
of
some
a Canadian
ways,
tennis
it's
stadium
worse
in August.
because there's
the room
no obvious
Alex
mistake
Eala
to fix.
is in now
No clear
is not
flaw to correct. Just time, ticking forward while the gap between potential and
as Hale
proof
suggested, is
refuses
now
to close.
on record.
By the middle
This
of this
is not
decade,
being
Alex
described
Eala
as
was
a
a
novelty.
gifted player
It is
with
being
a compelling
described as an
backstory and
effect.
painfully
The
little to show
stakes of
for
what
it
that
at the top
effect
of the
means
sport.
are
No WTA Tour title, no signature win over an elite opponent that the wider tennis
larger
world
than
would
one
actually
match.
remember.
The
Just
WTA
years of
has
almost
spent the
stacked
past
one on
several
top of the other
seasons
in
openly
front of
searching for
stadiums
star
nowhere
power
close
in
to
the
full.
vacuum
If
left
you'd
by the
watched her play
retirement of
during
players
that
like
stretch,
Serena
you
Williams.
would have seen the talent clearly. You would not have seen a single sign that within a matter of months, she was about to become
It
one
has
of the most
invested
talked
in
about
production,
names in all
in
of women's
broadcast
tennis.
innovation,
Because right
in
when it
narrative
looked like
marketing.
this story might
What it has
quietly
not
fade
been
into
able to
another what could have
manufacture
been,
is a player from a
everything
market
changed.
previously
And it
game
started
has
in
been
a city nobody expected. Here's the twist almost nobody talks about when they tell the Alex Eala story. Everyone assumed
Czech
the breakthrough
Republic.
would come on
Asia
the
has
biggest
produced
possible
100 million
stage.
people in the
A
Philippines,
grand slam,
plus a diaspora
marquee match
that
against a
Statistics
household
Canada
name under
expects
bright
to nearly
lights.
triple
That
in
is
Canada
not how it
alone within
happened
a
at all.
generation.
It happened in
That
Washington,
is what the
not
Eala
Wimbledon,
effect actually
not the
names.
U.S. Open.
And the
At a
immediate
WTA
consequences of it are
500
on the
event,
schedule.
most casual
She plays
sports
doubles with
fans
Venus
couldn't
Williams
even
on
locate
Center
a
Court
calendar.
on Thursday
The
night
Mubadala
against
DC Open,
Lyudmila
a tournament
Samsonova.
that, on paper, sits well below the glamour everyone assumes defines a career. And that's exactly why what
Cincinnati
happened there
begins
matters so
immediately
much more
after
than people give it
Toronto
credit
from
for.
August
Eala
7th
didn't
to
sneak through a soft draw to grab her first title. She went through Zheng Qinwen, an Olympic
18th.
gold medalist.
Then the
She
U.S.
went through
Open on
Leylah
August
Fernandez,
30th,
the
where for the
defending
first time
champion
in her
of that
career,
very
Alex
event. And in
Eala
the
will
final,
walk in as
she
a
stood
seeded
across
player.
the net from Jessica Pegula.
Eala played
a
her
top
first
American
round
player
match
fighting
against
in
the
front of her
American
own
Alicia
home crowd.
Parks.
Now, here's where most retellings of this story quietly get it wrong. The popular version makes it sound like she simply dominated her way to the
She
trophy.
then lost the next two.
She didn't.
6-3
She
and
dropped the first
6-2.
set of that
She
final,
left Melbourne
then
down
rain rolled
0-1 in
the
her
match,
head-to-head with
forcing
Parks.
it to pause and pick back up the following day, which meant she had an entire night to sit alone with a deficit
There was
against
no
a
dramatic
top-ranked
press
opponent
conference.
on American
She
soil.
simply
Think about
went
what
back
that
to work.
actually does to a player
Between
who spent
January and
years being
August,
told
her
she hasn't
ranking
delivered
climbed
when it
from the
counts
low
most.
40s
A full
to
night,
world number
alone
20.
with her thoughts.
She
down a set. Every unmet expectation from the last several years, sitting
reached
quietly
the Bad
in the room
Homburg
with her. Most
quarterfinals
players
on
in
grass.
that exact
She
spot fold the
upset
next
Swiatek
day.
at
The
Wimbledon.
pressure
She
compounds.
won her
The
first
self-doubt from every
WTA
previous
title
near
in
miss
Washington.
comes flooding
And
back
on Wednesday night,
she
on
did
the court,
opposite.
she was moved
She walked back out and took apart Pegula over the final two sets. Not narrowly, convincingly,
She beat Alicia
and the
Parks
instant that last point
6-1,
landed,
4-6,
Alex Eala
6-2.
became the first
Notice the
Filipina
small
in history
symmetry
to win
in
a
those
WTA
scores.
Tour
In
title.
Melbourne,
But here's the
Parks
part that
closed
reframes
6-2.
everything you
The
thought
score
you
line
understood
itself
about this journey. That title alone did not create Eala Mania. Plenty of players win a first
is a
title,
piece
and
of
the wider
quiet
sport
redemption.
barely blinks
So
outside
back to the room.
diehard fans.
2,800 seats was the room the tour's model built
the thing
for
that should change
Alexandra.
how you see this entire story. It was never really just about Washington. It was about who was
Eala
watching from thousands of miles away. Filipino communities scattered across North America, in Toronto, in California, in the DMV region itself, had been quietly following her career for years.
10,000 strong is the room
title,
she walked into.
No signature
The gap
win to rally
between those
behind.
two numbers.
The moment she finally delivered one, all of that dormant, patient support didn't slowly build up over time. It detonated instantly. So let go of the assumption
not a scheduling
you probably
error.
walked
It is the
in with.
sound of a
You
diaspora.
likely figured the
from
flags,
Toronto, from
the sold-out
Mississauga,
crowds,
from Scarborough,
the
from
mania,
every city on
all
the map
of it
of
grew
Filipino
gradually as her ranking climbed. It didn't. It ignited in a single week. The moment she handed a
Laban,
massive
the Tagalog
diaspora
word for
community
fight,
the one
carried
thing
into
they
the
had been
stand, not
waiting
the
years to
room the
celebrate. Here's an
WTA's
image that
data
actually
model
captures what
predicted for
happened.
her.
Picture
It
a
is
stadium
bigger.
wired with fireworks, all connected, already sitting untouched for years,
bigger.
just waiting
Cincinnati
on a single spark.
is next.
Washington was
the
never
U.S.
the
Open
slow
is next
beginning of a
after that.
rise.
She said it
It was the
herself in the
spark that
summer
set
from
the whole
Wimbledon,
thing off at
knowing
once.
that we are
And
all
once it
in this
started,
together.
it did
Whatever
not
room
slow
she
down.
walks into for
It
the rest of
followed
this
her
hard
straight
company
into
she is
Toronto.
keeping.
Now,
if
take
you
a
want to
second and
follow
really
how
sit with
Toronto
what you
sets
just
up
heard,
the round of 32
because I want to know if this
and how
changes how you see her run in Toronto. Drop a comment and tell me if you had any idea that Washington Final was the true origin point of Eala Mania, not something that built quietly over years like most people assume. I'm genuinely curious how many of you already knew that. Because what happened after Washington isn't just a continuation of a good story. It's proof that this entire phenomenon was never just hype. And the evidence for that is even more convincing than the moment itself. If Washington was the spark, what came next is the proof that this was never just a lucky week. Eala didn't stumble into Toronto riding a wave of goodwill only to quietly lose in the first round. She kept winning. 7 matches in a row. 7. That streak stretches back through Washington and carries straight into the National Bank Open, which means she has not dropped a single match on North American hard courts all summer. 0 losses. 7 wins. That's not momentum. That's dominance held under pressure that would crack most players wide open. Now look closely at exactly who she beat to get there, because this is where the story stops being about one good tournament and starts being about something much bigger. In the second round in Toronto, she beat Alicia Parks, an American, 6-1, 4-6, 6-2. In the third round, she faced Caty McNally, another American, and after rolling her ankle mid-match and needing a medical timeout right there on court, she still closed it out 6-3, 5-7, 6-4, 3 straight wins over American opponents on American and Canadian soil. in front of crowds that increasingly belong to her and her alone. Eala in the Washington final. Parks in round 2. McNally in round 3. That's not coincidence, that's a pattern. And here's a detail that ties everything back to the very first question we asked. How does a player ranked outside the top 5 sell out a stadium faster than the biggest names in the sport? Toronto's tournament director, Karl Hale, gave reporters the answer himself. He said flat out that they had never seen a player ranked outside the top 5 have this kind of effect on ticket sale. Every seat for her second-round match sold out within 30 minutes of the schedule going up. 30 minutes. For a player that, 1 year ago, most casual sports fans in North America had never even heard of. But the proof that truly seals this whole story isn't the ticket sales. It's what happened after Caty McNally walked off that court having just lost.
This
She
wasn't
didn't leave
simply
bitter.
another opportunity.
She stood in front of
It was another
reporters
measuring
and
stick.
openly praised Eala, acknowledging the extraordinary crowd behind her and the impact she's having on the entire sport. Sit with what that actually means for a second. This isn't Filipino media inflating a feel-good story about their own athlete. This is an American player, someone who just lost, someone with every reason
But tennis
to stay
has
quiet,
little time for
choosing
reflection.
instead to publicly
Only 2
validate
days after
what's
the biggest
happening
victory
around
of her career,
opponent. That's
Eala
the
was back
detail
on court.
most casual viewers
It was
completely
more
miss.
than an upset.
When the players you're
It was a
beating start
defining
acknowledging
moment.
your impact
Moments
right
that
after losing
responded
to you,
differently.
That's not hype
She
anymore.
completely
That's
transformed
confirmation
the match.
from inside
Her
the sport
movement
itself.
became sharper.
So let's close the loop on the question we opened with. Why does a player outside the top 5 sell out a WTA 1000 stadium faster than Gauff or Swiatek might on any given day? It's never just one thing. It's a diaspora community that had waited years for a reason to show up. A breakthrough that arrived loaded
Standing
with
at the
maximum emotional
baseline
weight
before
in
a
Washington.
crucial serve.
A perfect 7-0
Walking to the
streak
top.
against
Climb through the
elite
rankings
competition
that
right
gradually
after it.
transformed
And now,
potential into proven
respect being
achievement.
paid out loud
There were
by the
setbacks
very
too.
players
Board
she
could not be
keeps
measured
defeating.
in prize
Every
money.
piece of that
She had
connects
earned
straight back to the flags you saw in the opening shot of this video. Every single one of those flags represents someone who has been waiting for exactly this moment. And she's not finished. Waiting for her next is Belinda Bencic, a former Olympic gold
inspire
medalist
the next
and a
generation.
past champion
Since
of
Wimbledon,
this very
Eala's
tournament.
profile
Win
has
that,
continued to grow.
and the road potentially leads straight to Coco Gauff, the biggest American star in the sport, in a quarterfinal unlike anything women's tennis has
Zeynep
ever seen from a
Sonmez
Filipino
of
player before.
Turkey.
So let's circle all
Someone
the way back to where
captured
we
the
started.
moment.
How does a
At
player
first,
outside the top 5 in the world sell out a stadium faster than the biggest names in tennis? The answer is simple now. She isn't just winning matches. She's building something the sport has never truly had before. A real, living connection to a nation of over 100 million people who never had a reason to watch tennis until she gave them one. But here's what makes this bigger than one player, one country, or one summer. Women's tennis has drawn its stars from the same handful of places for decades. The United States, Russia,
she had earned belief,
Spain,
not only from
France,
the crowd,
Eastern
from herself.
Europe. Entire continents have sat on the sidelines of this sport
On
for
paper,
generations,
the matchup
not
appeared
because the
heavily
talent wasn't out there,
one-sided.
but because
On the grass,
nobody had ever
it
broken
became
through
something
to prove
the
it
path was
possible.
never supposed to be
Alex Eala just
easy.
proved that it is.
Yet year after
and
year,
that matters far
she
beyond her own career.
Then a
Every
single
young girl in the
experience
Philippines
quietly
picking up a racket
reinforces
for the first
everything
time
they've
right
been
now
working
has something
toward.
she
its
never
most
had.
iconic stages.
Proof.
She
Not a
dropped to her
promise,
knees,
not
overwhelmed
potential.
by the
Proof
magnitude.
that this exact path actually leads somewhere real. Think about what that means for the next decade of this sport. If one player from a country with zero tennis history can create this level of impact, what happens the moment a second one follows behind her? What happens when academies finally start recruiting
She was thinking
from
about the
parts
little
of
girl
world
who
they've
practiced
ignored
after
for
school,
generations?
about her
That's the real story unfolding in Toronto right now, underneath every single one of those flags.
turns
As
more
for
aggressive,
what comes
and her
next,
confidence seemed to grow
that
with
part hasn't
every
been written
passing
yet.
game. She seized
Bencic
control.
stands in her way first. Beyond that, possibly Gauff, in a match that could redraw
Folding for
everything
years.
we think we know
Back in
about where this
2022,
sport's next
she announced
great
herself by
rivalry is going to come from. Is Alex Eala ready for that moment? Is women's tennis ready for what she represents? We're about to find out in real time, and I don't want you to miss a single second of how it plays out. If you want to watch exactly what happens next in
Respect
this
for the
story,
past,
subscribe
excitement
now,
for the
because
future.
this is far
Then,
from finished.
something
This is just where
unexpected.
it starts getting good.